Well, welcome, Dale. Welcome to the podcast, Uncut and Real Raw. This is my guest, Dale Klapmeier. Is that correct, Dale?
That's correct.
Very good. Well, thank you for being on, Dale.
Yeah, appreciate being here.
So, Dale, just a little bit of recap for the audience watching and listening. We didn't know each other until 5 minutes ago, and we were introduced by a mutual friend of ours called Randy Massey. Randy Massey is a great friend of mine, has a lot of cow horses with me, loves great horses, very successful entrepreneurial man himself. And when I told him about the podcast, that I was wanting to interview people that were very successful in life and business and success, he said, you have to talk to this guy, Dale. Okay, so that's how kind of we came apart, together here, and that's kind of a little pre-context there. So Dale, for the people at home and for myself, basically I'm going to do this in a nutshell. So if I butcher some of this, no offense, but basically you're the inventor, and we're going to, in common terms here, you were the inventor of the Cirrus Aircraft. Is that pretty much the best way to describe what you are?
Yeah, but you got to put it together. It started with my brother and I.
Your brother and you. So just in common terms now, I don't know a lot about planes. I have a lot of buddies that own them. I figured out it's much cheaper for me to use their planes than own my own.
That's always the case.
You know what I mean? So Cirrus, for the people who don't know, is an aircraft. It's basically a 4-seater aircraft, a 5-seater aircraft, but basically for common layman's terms has a parachute. It's is it the only plane that has a parachute or one of the few?
It's the only certified production airplane with a parachute that comes standard.
Right. So basically it's a small plane that seats roughly 4 people. If you get into trouble, shit hits the fan, whatever reason, you can pull a lever and basically a parachute comes out and it will direct you to the ground. Is that correct?
That's accurate.
In layman's terms. I know there's a lot more technical shit than that.
No, but in the simplest way, there's a handle on the ceiling, which is, I suppose, would be like a ripcord. Mm-hmm. You grab that handle, it activates a rocket that pulls the parachute out from just behind the cabin, and the parachute then takes the entire airplane and lowers the airplane to the ground. When you pull that parachute, you can't disconnect it. There aren't any retakes. You can't say, I didn't really want to do that. When you pull it,
you're done.
The airplane's going down. You have just given the insurance company your airplane.
Fair enough.
But it's there to protect the people inside.
Yes. So if the pilot had a heart attack, passed out, something happened, a passenger can pull this handle as well, correct?
Yep. It's right in the middle where anybody can reach it.
Right. Yep. Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was told, and again, might be a true rumor or not true rumor, that this is actually the most popular 4-seater plane in the world. Is that right or wrong, or?
There's nuances to that.
Okay.
I mean, there's the most popular would probably be a Skyhawk because there's 40,000 of them. Yes. They've been in production forever.
Okay.
We are the best-selling single-engine airplane in the world.
Okay. Now, you also have another airplane that I've heard is very successful, which is a single-engine jet. Is that correct?
Yep.
And does that seat 4 or 5 people? How many people does that seat?
That seats what we call it is a 5+2. Mm-hmm. So it will seat 7 as long as 2 of them are children under 90 pounds.
Okay. Right. And that's the second main part of this plane, this company, correct? The Cirrus Aircraft. Okay.
Yep.
So basically, that was kind of, we'll get into it, but that's the contents of this show, is you and your brother, and we're about to learn about your life story, basically built this company up to what it is today. Because one thing for sure, I love asking questions to pilots and people that own planes. Everybody knows what your planes are. Everybody knows what they are. Everybody oohs and ahs over them. Even the people that I've found, the odd person that doesn't like them, when you really push on it and say, why don't you like them? They really just say it's money. You know what I mean? They can't. They might bitch and say, well, it's overpriced. But reality is, when you push them and say, well, is it not quality? No, it's the best in line. Does it do anything wrong? No, it's the best of what they do. When you keep pushing them a little bit, they really fold pretty cheaply. You know what I mean? And so even the haters, when I dig for information of what you don't like about, because I was seriously thinking about buying one of your planes. Randy Massey's got one. I flew in quite a few of the Cirrus planes, and I've liked it. And I seriously thought about getting my own. And so I asked, when I'm going to get into something new, especially spending the kind of money, what is it, 1.2 million to get into one of those planes, somewhere around that?
Well, no, we have a a smaller engine version of our single engine piston. You get into that for about $500,000.
Okay.
And up to about 1.1 for a turbocharged,
Top of the line.
Top of the line.
That's what Randy would have, correct?
Yep,
Top of the
that's
line. And
yep.
I've flown in his quite a bit. Okay.
Yeah. And then on top of that, then the next level up is our jet, the Vision jet.
Yes. So I was thinking about seriously about buying one, but whenever I get into something new, I ask millions of questions. I try to pick it apart. I want everybody's opinion, and I could hardly get anybody to say anything negative about your product. The biggest negative I found, which was pretty damn small, was the price. And when I dug into that more, they really couldn't say it wasn't worth it. They just didn't like it. Does that make sense? And everybody's got to have their haters. Okay?
Well, we're competitive at the price. So.
Yeah. So it's very, very popular, and anybody in the flying world would know who you are. So just for context, the people that aren't into planes, that's why we're just having this little brief introduction of what it is and so forth. So what I'm really interested in, this plane's popular all over the world, from what I understand.
Yep.
The jet, the single engine prop, etc. I want to know where it all got started. So let's go back. Where'd you grow up as a kid?
Grew up in a town called DeKalb, Illinois.
Okay.
You seen the flying ear of corn, DeKalb bag? That was from our hometown. So it was farming
from
community.
Chicago, north, south, east, or west?
We are 60 miles straight west of Chicago.
Okay, right. Then.
So in the middle of corn country.
Fair enough. Grew up there as a kid, and how did you get into planes? How did this whole thing get started? As far as, were you always interested in planes as a kid? Went through high school? Your dad a pilot? Somebody had to give you this bug, or did you just come up with it?
No. Flying was a part of the family.
Okay.
So my uncle was a pilot, and the first time I was in an airplane was with him, or the first time in a small airplane was in my uncle's airplane. He had a float plane in Minnesota, and when we were kids, he took the back seat of in his airplane, took the back seat out and had a cooler there, so we'd fly up to his cabin, and the kids, we'd be sitting on the cooler in the back of the airplane flying up to the lakes in very northern Minnesota.
What kind of plane was it?
So it was a Cessna 180.
Okay.
So it's a utility, more of a utility-based airplane. Great airplane.
Now that's
fantastic float plane.
Yes, that's the kind of plane to get started flying, isn't it?
Well, no. You would start in a single-engine trainer or something, probably smaller.
Okay.
That would be an ideal family airplane, especially if you're going in and out of shorter strips, or in his case, a float plane. Yeah. It can carry a lot. It can get in and out off the water. It was a great airplane. But even backing up before that, so my uncle learned to fly and got his pilot's license as soon as he was old enough to. My grandfather had a dairy. He built pasteurizing equipment for the dairy industry in central Minnesota. And even starting back in the 30s, he owned an airplane. He was never a pilot, but he had a pilot and a small airplane, and they'd actually land in hayfields next to dairies, and he'd go in and either sell his equipment, or he might be there to work on equipment and that type of thing. So he used very small general aviation airplanes from the 1930s.
Did he fly him himself, or somebody flew him in?
Nope, he had a pilot.
Huh.
He never learned
That's
to fly.
kind of pretty visionary back in those days, to be basically a traveling salesman to some degree.
Yep.
And have enough vision to say, hell, I'm not going to fucking drive. I'm going to fly, and I can get to twice as many places. Surely nobody else was doing that.
I don't know if anybody else was doing it in his industry.
Yes.
But yeah, it gives you an opportunity to beat
Yes.
the competitors to the opportunity.
Yes.
And that's where aviation makes sense.
Yes.
So as I grew, I suppose I would say I followed my brother, Alan, who he and I started the company together.
How old's your brother?
He's 3 years older than I am.
Okay.
So I'm the little brother following him
If you don't mind me
around.
asking, how old are you?
I'm 61.
Okay, I'm 47, righto.
So I was the little brother following him
Yeah.
around. We always built model airplanes and, loved everything about airplanes. When we were small, riding our bikes, we'd ride out to the airport to see if there's any cool airplanes there. Always following the industry.
Like you would, even as a kid, look at airplane magazines, follow clubs,
Yeah.
anything to do with aviation. You and your brother really, enjoyed it.
Yes, yeah.
That's awesome.
So when my brother, Alan, wanted to learn to fly, my parents said he couldn't learn to fly until they did. So both my parents got their pilot's license. I was, I think, 10 at the time. Alan was 13, so that's when he wanted to, he was getting close. He could start doing ground school and that type of thing. And that was enough to get my parents to fly. So they bought a Cessna, 1960 Cessna, and that would have been, I think, 1970, 71. Yep. So from the time I'm 10 or 11, we're traveling more in the airplane now than we did before. And, so I, in a sense, grew up in the back of the airplane from that.
So what did your parents do for a living then? If your grandfather did the dairy equipment, what did your parents do?
We do come from a very entrepreneurial family.
Okay, so genetically, so what were they into?
So my parents were into nursing homes.
Okay.
He owned 3 nursing homes. And again, a very interesting story. My dad was a youth director at a very large Lutheran church in the town of DeKalb. DeKalb is also the home of barbed wire. And there were a couple of very large mansions in town. One was the Elwood Mansion, which was turned into a museum, and you could go walk through this, 1860s beautiful home. The other, about 6 blocks away, was donated to the church. And now think about this, I don't know how big it was. Say it's 20,000 square foot, 100-year-old home, donated to the church. They discussed what should they do with this home. Since my dad works for the church, he said, well, why don't we turn it into a place for the elderly in our congregation? And instead, they tore it down and turned it into a parking lot. Okay. Which, I like to say pissed off my dad. Maybe it didn't, not necessarily pissed him off, but disappointed him.
And lit a fire.
He did enough work into it to realize, well, there's a market for this. That's awesome. So he went, he's a youth director. Yeah. You don't get to rub 2 nickels together.
Yes.
As a youth director.
But but the key thing that I just heard there is he saw an opportunity.
He saw an opportunity.
He saw an opportunity. People are getting born every day. There's babies being born every day, and there's people dying every day. And whether you like to talk about it or not, that's a fact. People are getting born and people are dying every single day. What I love right there is your father looked at something that somebody else said, we're not doing it, and basically scrapped it. But still saw an opportunity there. That's what I like right there. A lot of opportunities don't just drop in your lap. You have to look. You have to be looking. You have to have an interest. You have to have a passion for something to grab a hold of. And that's what I heard right then, is that he saw something and said, I'm going to dig into it some more. So what happened?
And actually, to follow on that, the real point is he grew up in a family where his dad took risks and started a small business and struggled through that and made it a successful business. My dad started going literally door to door to raise money for a home for the elderly. His business plan was, it's for people who can afford to pay to come. Yes. There's a county home there. If a government assistant, there's already a place for you. Yep. He wanted to build something special. And he had not a background in it, but an entrepreneurial background that he wasn't afraid to take a risk. Yes.
See, and that's what I think, Dale, in my opinion, I think there's 2 types of people in the world. There's people that should own businesses and there's people that shouldn't own businesses. And if there's anything that I could tell to the people that shouldn't own businesses is the people that don't own businesses, I think they underestimate or don't see how much risk people take in the beginning starting businesses. Usually they're starting like your dad, no capital. They're trying to go raise it. They have to take mortgages out on their homes. Like their nuts are on the chopping board a little bit, which I think is a big part of why a lot of them are successful, because when you got skin in the game and you don't get to eat, if this thing doesn't work, you're sure motivated to do a 15, 16-hour day. You're sure motivated to work Sunday. You're sure motivated to do some things that are pretty damn uncomfortable to get this thing up and running. I think a lot of people, when they see a business that's very successful and making a lot of money, they have this illusion that it just started like that. If it was that fucking easy, everybody would be doing it.
Right.
You know, everybody would be doing it. So when he was going door to door, was he asking for them to buy into it like a timeshare or what?
No, he was looking for investors.
Yes.
He was looking for enough people to back him to actually be able to go get loans from the bank.
Yes.
To get started. He
Some
was
seed
looking
money.
for advice. I mean,
Yeah.
he's working for a church. He wasn't running a business. He didn't know how to run a business. He was looking for people that would stand with him and help him learn.
Yep.
Because there's, with any business, you know, we all start a business. Maybe this is an arrogant way to look at it, but we so often start thinking, well, we got all the answers.
Yeah.
We got this. No, you don't know a damn thing when you start. You got to be smart enough to learn as you go through it.
Yeah, but I always say, that's true, Dale, but I almost think you got to be somewhat arrogant to start businesses because there's enough fucking roadblocks in your way and there's enough potholes, Dale, that if you don't have some gumption and some arrogance and I'm better than you attitude, you'll quickly quit. Starting a business is not for the fucking faint-hearted, is it?
You gotta be willing to take the risk.
Yes.
And actually, Alan would sum it up. He had a great way of describing it. He said, starting off is you're jumping off a cliff and there's water down there. You just hope it's deep enough.
Yes.
Because you don't know
No,
till
you
you
don't
hit the
know.
water.
No,
but
you don't know.
jump and you
Yes.
do it. But once you jump, I mean, you've jumped.
Yes, you have jumped.
You've jumped.
As financially, mentally, etc. And that's where it's not for the faint-hearted.
Right.
If you're a scared kind of person in life, owning your own business is not what you need to do. Get a paycheck, sign the back of the check 40 hours a week. That's your job. But you're never going to get ahead financially. You're never going to have any real retirement, in my opinion, playing it safe. You know, when you sit in the middle of the fence, you get splinters in your ass. You got to pick a team. Are you going to be on the risk team and go get it? Or on the scared team that won't go get it? They'll play it safe, which nothing wrong with that to some degree, but don't bitch that you don't have the money, the retirement, don't have the lifestyle these other people have got. You're either one team or via the other team.
Yeah, and I actually look at it slightly different, or I think of it slightly different. If you're starting the business because you're looking for that lifestyle, I'm going to start this business because I'm going to make a whole bunch of money.
Yep.
Your chances of success are probably pretty low.
Okay.
Because you don't start a business thinking, oh, I'm going to be rich. You start a business because you're passionate about something. You understand something. You want to do it.
And you think you can do it better than somebody else.
You think you can do it better. And
yes. Or a better way of doing it.
Yeah, if you're doing it for money, man, it's a tough life.
Yes.
For the money.
Yes.
You know, you got to do it because you love what you're doing.
Clinton's grabbing a cocktail and we'll be right back. Get yourself one and enjoy this short clip.
People are attracted to genuine and authentic people. That's what, and now, people either love me or hate me. I get it. I'm real polarizing. And I'm okay with that. There's lots of people that hate my fucking guts. And I'm not mad about it. Don't get upset. Because I say, good luck. There's somebody else out there you will like. Other people like me the way I am. But you can't please everybody. So I quit trying many years ago, to try to please everybody. Because the more you try to please everybody, the more pissed off everybody gets.
And the more unhappy you are because of it.
Yeah, so you might as well just be who you are and let it fall where it falls.
Yeah.
So tell me, your dad got it up and running, and what happened to his first nursing home? How did he?
He became very successful. They started with a 60-bed nursing home and then doubled the size of that one, and from there went to the next town and built
And this would have been in what, the 60s, 70s, 80s? When?
Early 60s.
Okay, early 60s.
So I think we opened our place in 66.
So do you know if this concept of a nursing home for better off people or for more financially successful people. Was that even a thing back in the day, or your dad really kind of created that? You know, I'm not saying he created the whole industry, but what I'm saying is, was it popular? Did anybody ever heard of it? I agree that there was probably government assistant housing, but was this a new concept back in that time?
You know, I can't answer that.
Fair enough.
It was certainly new in our area.
Yeah.
There was no other opportunity for assisted living or nursing care.
Yeah.
You know, in the early 60s, you had the county home and you had your family.
Yes.
And it was actually probably most common. The family took care of
Yes.
you. And my dad looked at it, and it came from the idea of this is going to be for the congregation. You know, we are
Yeah.
separate from the nursing home. If you need the government assistance,
Yeah.
you have opportunities. If you don't need the government assistance, let's make something a little bit more special. And that was his business model, and it
Got
turned out
successful.
being successful.
So what lessons in business do you think you could take away from your dad? If you could say, hey, this is the number one or two things that I took from my dad, just to, like, give you a perfect example. If I had to say the number one greatest thing that I took from my parents, and my parents were entrepreneurial people too, I would say it was work ethic. The most invaluable lesson they taught me was to work. Nobody ever, you know, Ian Francis, another one of my mentors, says nobody ever drowns in their own sweat.
Yep.
So work ethic was the greatest thing they instilled in me and my sister. And how they instilled it was basically living it. Seeing them work 14-hour days, standing beside them, seeing them take risk on businesses. So that was a gift I was given. Now, as a kid, you probably didn't like some of it. You know, you bitched you want to go play on Saturday when you had to work. You know what I mean? But that was probably the greatest gift my parents gave me, was the ability to have a work ethic, which I think later on in my life served me extremely well, because in my industry, I've always been publicly said, I'm not the best horse trainer or clinician. I never had the most talent. I wasn't the best. Where I beat my competition is I outworked them.
Yeah.
I outsmarted them and I outworked them. And because I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, I had to surround myself with people that were much smarter than me to help me where I was weak. So if you could answer that question for your own father or parents, what do you think was the greatest gift they might have given you?
Well, certainly the work ethic was part of it. You know, because both my parents worked there, and growing up, they'd come home, we'd have dinner together, and my dad would go back to the office after dinner.
Yes.
Virtually every single night. Sundays, we'd go to church.
And what time would he get home? 10:30, 11? When would he get home?
I'm thinking probably 9. He'd come home at 5, leave again at 6, go back to the nursing home, be there till like 9.
Yep.
Be home 10 after 9.
Yeah. I remember my parents doing very similar things, yes.
Yeah. You know, and it's a service industry.
Yes.
It's being there matters. You can't just
hand it off.
You can't run a nursing home from home.
Yes, you got to be in the trenches.
Yeah. And then, you know, Sundays we'd go to church, and after church we'd go to the nursing home. Sundays was the cook's days off. So my mom cooked the meals on Sundays. We served, you know, and so I was probably 5 years old when we first opened, 4 or 5. So, you know, when I'm 6, 7, 8 years old, we're going there after church. We had our chores, you know, it's cleaning floors. And for me, I had to go around when I was real little and empty the waste baskets in every single room. Well, I remember it was like I had 60 grandparents.
Yeah.
They were all excited. You know, little kids are coming into the room, you know, and we're talking. And of course, they're giving me their candy, you know, and everything else. It was like,
I love it.
You know, like, this didn't work. This is fun. I mean, how do you beat this?
Even if you're picking up waste, it's still fun.
It was fun. And that's how I remember my childhood.
That's awesome.
Working at these things. And as we got older, you know, we would do the jobs that nobody else would do or didn't want other people to do. And it was always the cleaning and that type of thing. And but I remember one night I think I was early in high school, before I could drive, you know, the sewer system clogged. You know. So my dad and I are opening up in the basement of this building, the clean outs, and we're standing there with rotor-rooters and trying to clean it out. And I'm thinking, oh my God, there is nothing worse than this.
Yes.
And why don't we hire somebody to do this? And he's going, at 10 o'clock at night? No, you can't hire anybody. We're here doing it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's, and there's something that has to be done.
See, what I like
you go
about
do.
what I like about that is it doesn't sound like your dad asked you to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. And I've always been big about that in my business. I've had, different employees might say I'm an arsehole, I'm a piece of shit, whatever you want. But one thing they'll never say about me is if I told them to dig the ditch, I sure as shit would do it myself. I would never ask anybody to do anything that I hadn't done myself or hadn't done a lot by myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I knew how long it took. I knew how difficult it was. I knew it was inconvenient. But you got to be willing to get in the trenches. You got it. That's some of the most successful, well, really about the only real successful generational businesses I've ever seen. I often find it interesting how very few businesses get past the third generation of family when one common thing doesn't happen. The kids don't start at the fucking bottom.
Yeah.
They don't start at the bottom in the mailroom doing the shittiest jobs, cleaning the toilets, whatever the hell it is. And then through grade school, high school, college, young adult, they work their way up 20 years later to the top. And when they do that, those businesses will typically go on, generational businesses. But when they don't put them in the bottom and don't make them stir the shit and don't make them basically pay their dues, they piss the money away.
Yeah.
I love watching the History Channel and those type of YouTube TV shows about history and things. And I love watching how much generational wealth just got pissed away within 3 generations of people not doing that simple task of starting their kids at the bottom. So your dad kind of knew that. So you would probably say...
And he certainly taught us
Yes.
that. Both my boys started their first jobs, were going out to Cirrus, and, Ryan would have been in 8th grade. How are you? 13 in 8th grade. And every day he had to go wash the bugs off all the airplanes on the ramp and wash all the windows. And that'd take a couple hours, but at 13, every day, you got to go do that. Then he was a janitor. He was cleaning the bathrooms every night after school through high school and mowing the lawns. And then when he got into college, he got his pilot's license, and then
I think, Dale, I think it's important that employees see that.
Yeah.
I think it's important that other employees that work for you see your kid at the bottom and earn their respect from their peers as they grow older and go up the chain. I think that's an important part. Maybe I look more into that, but I think that's an important part.
And it is. And it was important to me that they learned that, and they're not working for me.
Yes.
They're working for somebody else who expects them
to get the job done.
And in reality, probably a little harder on them than they would otherwise, just because, it's the boss's son.
That's right.
I'm going to make sure he works. And both boys did that, and they both learned to work.
Let's back up a little bit here. So your dad had the entrepreneurial spirit. He taught you how to work hard. Any other lesson you could say, one other great lesson you would take from your dad or your parents as a kid growing up before we move on?
Yeah, there were 2 things that he always said. And one I kind of alluded to already. He said, don't ever do anything just for the money.
Okay, fair enough.
Do what you want to do what you love doing, do what you're passionate about, do it really well, and the money will come.
Okay.
Don't do it for the money.
Okay.
And then when Alan and I went to them with this crazy idea of we're going to go take on Cessna, we're going to go build airplanes, the other thing he said is, well, you're young, you've got nothing, so you got nothing to lose.
That's right.
Go do it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You got nothing to lose.
And that's something that is important, is supportive parents. I left high school, Dale, at 15. Who encourages their kid to leave high school at 15? I have no high school education, have no college education. I can barely spell my own name. I can read at a 5th grade level. But I made a lot of fucking money. But my parents let me leave school at 15. And not only let me, encouraged me, because I had passion for what I wanted to do. I was really good at it. I was insane insistent. I wanted to go rule the world. You know what I mean? And they didn't want to stop me. Now, looking back on it, it kind of seems crazy that your parents would encourage that. And I'm not trying to say every 15-year-old kid needs to leave school by any means. But what I am saying is that the parents' support was a big deal. So your dad telling you, you're young, you got nothing to lose. And that's one of the greatest things about being that age is you're kind of ballsy because you got nothing to lose.
Right.
As I got older in life, I don't take anywhere near the risk now,
Yeah.
financially or just in life, that I took in my 20s and 30s.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
And it's interesting with your school analogy. So Ellen and I are talking about, we're going to start.
So you finished high school, you and your brother.
We finished high school, finished college. And
What'd you go to college for, if you don't mind me asking?
I studied economics and finance.
Okay.
So I've got a degree in economics and then a degree in business with a finance emphasis.
Okay, what about your brother?
So he studied economics and physics.
Okay, right up. So you get through college and you go home and say what?
Well, actually, it was before I was through. So Alan graduated from college, and he working in the administration office of Ripon College, where he went to school. When I start school, I go to the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, which is a smaller Division III school in Wisconsin. And a couple of years into it, I can go back and say how we actually got started, but I'm in school for a couple of years and finally figured it out. We're going to go build airplanes. And I want to build airplanes. And I remember sitting down with my parents saying, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to quit school and we're going to go start this company. And they said, no, you're not going to quit school. You're going to finish school, then you can go start the company.
And that's good advice.
But you are going to finish school. 2 years doesn't make a difference.
Yes.
Finish school. So we actually started the company. I graduated in December of 1983, and in January of 1984, we started Cirrus Aircraft.
And how'd you get the name Cirrus? Where'd that word come from? How'd that name come up?
Well, Cirrus is a cloud.
Okay.
It's the fastest fair weather cloud. So as a pilot, Cirrus clouds are good. That means there aren't any storms, and it's typically
Smooth sailing.
it's a beautiful day, and you'll see those wispy high clouds. That's a nice day. The name came up, 80, 81 time frame where, we're talking about building airplanes. We're dreaming as kids do. I'm in college. Alan is probably out of college at that time. We spend our summers in southern Wisconsin. We had by this time we had a vacation place, but it was a farm. And we're at the farm, that's where we could play with airplanes. And my grandparents live in Chicago, and we were going to fly down to Chicago. It's weekends or Sunday, it's pretty common to go to the grandparents on Sunday for dinner. And we were going to fly. We called flight service to get the weather brief from the FAA. And their weather brief was, it's going to be terrible. It's storms. There's no way you can make this flight VFR visually. There's no way you can make this flight. And I was like, okay, now we got to drive. We're going to drive 2.5 hours down there to have lunch with our grandparents and 2.5 hours back instead of flying. And on that day, the only cloud we saw all day was a cirrus cloud. So we're in a car when we should be flying and seeing the cirrus clouds, and I was like, well, not exactly sure what the business would be, but it's going to be called Cirrus.
That's awesome.
And it came up from the two of us sitting in the car driving down
That's
there.
awesome. So here's the question I really want to ask you. What gave you the vision or the insight to say you're going to build planes? Did you see what the industry was doing that wasn't as good? Or, okay, let me give you an example. When I got to America and somebody says, how did you become a clinician, teach people about horses, I went to my first equine expo and I saw my competitors out there doing what they do. And I was 21 at the time. And I looked at them and said, if this is what you think's good, you ain't seen nothing yet. Like, I saw a weakness there. I saw, if this is what you're getting off on, I can do better than this. This is nothing. And These guys are 45, 46 years old. I was 21. There was nobody in my age group willing to attack it. So I said, hell, by the time these guys retire, who's going to take their spot? Who's going to give them the run for their money? Now, I didn't wait around for them to retire. I pushed them out. Yep. But what gave me the vision to do what I do is the fact that I saw my competition, and it'll come across as arrogant, but I don't give a shit. I didn't fucking think much of them. And I said, this ain't nothing. I can do better than this. So that's what gave me the spark to get going and move on that deal and make money, blah, blah, blah. I want to know what you and your brother saw in the aviation industry, because this thing's already up and running. There's lots of planes, lots of plane manufacturers, etc. I want to know what made you and your brother say, we're going to make a better plane. We're going to make a different plane. I don't know, but I want to know what made you two have the balls to say, we're going to get into an industry as young 20-year-olds and compete against $1 million, multi-million dollar, maybe even $1 billion companies back then. I don't know. Yep. What gave you that vision that you wanted to get in the race? What did you see that was a niche or a hole that you could get into?
There's a few things. So when I turned 15, we buy a little tail dragger, the airplane that I learned to fly in then, and we keep it in a little strip, which is basically a hayfield, north of town. And that's what I learned to fly in. That's what spurred my enthusiasm from aviation, going from model building, and I'll fly around a little. And you asked what I did in college. Yeah. I thought I'd become a banker so I could afford to fly. Yeah, literally, that was I want to fly. Mm-hmm. And in high school, just before graduating from high school, I'm on a camping trip with one of my friends in northern Wisconsin, and it's Memorial Day weekend, and driving home on Monday, last week of school, starts the next day. We stop at little airports to see if there's any cool airplanes. So we're stopping at airports on the way back, and I find a wrecked airplane there. So I went into the fixed base operator, the little FBO there, and asked who owned the airplane, and they gave me the name of the couple that own it, and they're a mile down the road. Drive down the road, knock on the door. Woman comes to the door and said, I see you own the wrecked airplane sitting out there, and I'm kind of interested. And I'm sure this isn't exactly how it went, but the way I remember it was like, you're interested in it? Sold. It's like,
take this piece of shit off our hands.
Yeah, never saw the husband. It was just like, she's there, sold, you can have it. We bought this airplane.
Now it's all banged up, correct?
Yeah, it had flipped over in a storm.
Okay.
So it's all intact, but it's sitting upside down.
So it wasn't flying when it crashed. It was on the ground, and the wind blew it ass overhead. Okay, right. Now I'm with you.
So go home, tell Alan, we're going to buy an airplane. At this point, what I'm thinking is, we already own an airplane. We own a little two-seat tail dragger. This is another two-seat tail dragger. It's a Champ, different model, but it's in a sense the same market. And the plan was we were going to rebuild this thing over the summer between high school and starting college, sell it at the end of the summer, and make our first fortune in aviation.
I love it.
It took 2.5 years to rebuild it. It should have things that should have been replaced, we couldn't afford, therefore we fixed things that shouldn't have been fixed. And in the end, we had a flying wrecked airplane.
I love it.
But that spurred my enthusiasm on to, now I want to build airplanes.
Because you saw flaws in it?
No, that was, at this point, it was still just, this is cool, this is what I want to do.
Just fun to do.
This is what I want to do. And we went to Oshkosh. Oshkosh is the home of the Experimental Aircraft Association, the EAA. They have a summer week-long fly-in event. It's the largest aviation event in the world. 500,000 to 750,000 people come every year to this event. It's the Experimental Aircraft Association. So there is a segment of the aviation industry which is kind of like the last free enterprise place in the world of anything, where it's spurs on that enthusiasm to design and build your own airplane. It's going there to these shows that I realize, okay, this can be done.
Right.
We can go design an airplane. And so what was
Gave you
aviation?
confidence that can be done?
Confidence, seeing a path,
Yeah.
seeing a market.
Yep, seeing a market.
Yeah, so my path was, I want to learn to fly, or I want to be a pilot. Then rebuilding an airplane, I was like, okay, I want to work on airplanes. I want to build airplanes. Alan and I bought a kit plane then. So we're going to learn how to put together somebody else's design, but we're going to learn how to put that together. And as a couple of kids, we have no money. So
How old are you?
I would have been, well, when we bought I was 17 when we bought the wrecked airplane. So I'd have been 19 when we bought the kit plane. At that point, where do you get money? Parents.
Yep. Yep.
We had $200. That was the deposit for the kit. We put the deposit down in the kit, went back home and said, Mom, Dad, we need to borrow money. And they then started with the, we've all said it,
Yes,
who
absolutely.
have kids,
Yep.
What do you think we are, the bank?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do we all think parents are, the bank?
of course they
So they made us write a business plan
Love it.
on why they should lend us money and how that would be good for our education and future development into whatever we wanted to do. And they literally said, if they make us write a business plan, we'll never do it. And this whole crazy idea will go away and they won't have to worry about it. Well, we wrote a business plan.
See, I've never heard of that. I think that's fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
That's skin in the game.
Yeah,
It was
we
your
wrote a
first
business
hurdle.
plan.
It was your
Yeah.
first hurdle to make you and your brother get some skin in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it. That's smart parents right there.
We bought this kit plane. Now,
So you did the
back to
proposal. They liked it.
My dad actually admitted years later, he never read it. It was like 30 pages on why this was going to be such a...
He was probably pissed off, but you gave it to him.
No, he said he was so amazed that we actually did it. He lent us the money because we actually did it.
Fair enough.
He goes, I never actually read it, but you presented it and you had your charts and your facts and your figures and it was like, all right, So they lent us the money
To buy this kit plane.
to buy a kit plane. Now, the EAA is so important to our development and our growth. Kind of like you go into your first
Mentor.
shows,
Yep.
seeing an industry and learning about it and seeing the opportunity. The EAA showed us that opportunity. So when I was saying it's kind of that last area of freedom, the FAA has rules on what it takes to build an experimental airplane. And those rules are you have to actually do the work yourself.
Yeah.
You have to use aircraft quality hardware. You can't go to Menards and put a 3/4 inch screw into something. But if you use aircraft hardware, and you do the work and you take pictures of it, you prove what you're doing, they basically can't not license it. So I kind of describe it as I could go take an aircraft engine and bolt it to a tree stump. And if I use aircraft quality bolts and bolt it to that tree stump, they can't say you can't go try and fly it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So go try and, you're going to kill
If you're
yourself.
going to kill yourself, it's up to you.
But there is no rules against killing yourself.
That's right.
So the experimental aircraft industry in the late 70s and early 80s is developing what is called a kit plane. Somebody designs an airplane, they put together all the parts it takes, so they sell it to a person with a set of plans, and you build it in your garage.
I got a
or
couple
your,
of buddies that are doing that now.
yeah,
Yep.
your garage or your hangar. Well, growing up enthused about the aviation industry through the 1970s, the industry was growing very, very quickly. The industry produced over 120,000 new airplanes in that decade. Best decade since the war,
Yep.
since World War II, and certainly the best decade since. But in 1980, 78 was the top year, with 18,000 general aviation airplanes sold. In 79, it was very close to that, 17,000 some. 1980, it was like 10,000 airplanes. 81, 6,000 airplanes.
So is that because of the interest rates?
The market plummeted.
Yeah, but why? Money?
Interest rates was part of it. You look at interest rates, fuel, the economy. There's a lot of reasons why an industry is going to fall off. But to go from 18,000 and in a couple of years be at 4,000. And in 1988, it was the bottom of the industry at less than 1,000 airplanes. Actually, it was less than 900 airplanes. So in a decade, you're down to about, 5-6% of what the industry was. Well, we're watching it crash. There's insurance was skyrocketing. Interest was skyrocketing. As production went down for a company, they still have to cover all of their fixed costs and everything else, so they keep raising the cost.
Right.
And on top of that, companies like Cessna and Beechcraft and Piper and Mooney and all these companies, they were not putting their money into developing the entry-level airplanes. They weren't spending their money developing single-engine piston airplanes.
Because the market was crashing? They didn't think there was any money there? What was the reason for that?
They didn't think that there was money there. So the industry, and you can look back and say, well, they made the right business decisions, or they made, I don't know, right or wrong. They made this business decision. Cessna, they're building jets. They start building jets. Piper and Beech are building twin-engine turboprops, basically a jet engine spinning a propeller. All of the companies are investing, growing into bigger, better, more capable, far
Faster
more
planes.
expensive airplanes. And the lower end
Love it.
was not
Being
changing.
addressed.
So a Cessna 182 in 1980 is basically identical to a Cessna 182 that was built in 1970, except you're paying now $80,000 or $90,000 for this new airplane. A decade ago, it was $10,000, and the used airplane on the market. Then, the value of the used airplanes is going up really fast too, because there's no development. There's no reason to buy a new airplane. It's no better. Why would you buy a new one if your 10-year-old airplane is a quarter of the price and it's identical?
Yeah.
So we sat there and said, well, that's why it's crashing. All these other things are aspects of
Factors.
of driving it down, but no other industry went from 18,000 or say 100% down to 5% in a decade. There's
And
other
you
than,
and your brother, how old were you when you guys figured this out? When you guys
well,
kind of
this was
came
the
to this?
80, 81 time frame when we're saying there is a market here.
So you're ready
We're
to
gonna
start
go
your
do
business.
this.
That's what
Yeah.
made you see it.
Yeah. And that's where we say, okay, there really is an opportunity. We can go build a new, modern, better airplane than what the industry is producing. We're going to do it in this kit industry side. So the kit industry also, as we looked at it, we're building airplanes that were fun to build, fun to fly. We're looking at it and saying, that's filling a niche. We bought one and it was fun to fly, great. It was an aerobatic airplane and loved having it, but it was not competing with an old Cessna 172 or 182. We wanted a 4-seat, wanted something that you take a family with.
Yeah.
We wanted to fly cross country. We just wanted to fly faster, better. So we came at it. So when we start the company, I'm 23 years old and just graduated from college. So just spent a whole bunch of money having this piece of paper from a university that says I'm pretty smart. At that young age, complexity is cool. The harder something is, that's neat. So complexity was cool. The harder it is to fly, that's all cool. We built a kit plane that was the biggest, fastest, most capable, most expensive, hardest to build, hardest to fly, hardest to maintain, coolest airplane on the market.
Right.
Bar none. This thing was,
Badass.
it got all the attention because it was so unique and so cool. And it's what a 23-year-old comes up with. You know,
Yeah.
all of these things are cool. From doing it, we learned that, you know, being a very, very unique, coolest airplane is not the way to sell
Yeah.
a lot of airplanes.
Yes.
An airplane that's hard to fly is not a way to sell it, especially in this industry when it's hard to build. So being the most of anything puts you in a pinnacle that maybe there's a small market.
See, here's what's funny about that. I heard that, and what I heard in my industry was, I've always told my apprentices for years, because I always train lots of young people to do what I do for a living, and my goal was to always make them better than me, and so they didn't need me. And the kids that could ride a horse really well and had a lot of natural talent, I always told them that's your biggest downfall too, because they might have a horse kind of galloping across the pasture pretty fast, and they can sit it real good. They're talented, they got good motor skills, their coordination is good. And I'd stop them and say, do you want to go broke? And they'd say, what do you mean? I said, the lady that's going to write you a fucking check, she can't do that. That 65-year-old lady that's going to give you $10,000 for that horse, she can't go that fast. Retrain it. Get it to go slow. Get it to be comfortable. Get it to be safe. Dead people don't write checks. That's one of my famous sayings. Dead people don't write checks.
Right.
They got to live for me to get another dollar out of them. So I said, you could, and they'd look at me like I was crazy. What? He's doing just fine. You're 20 years old with a lot of skill, or at least talent. The lady that's going to write, no 23-year-olds have any money. You know, and you know what I mean? As a good rule of thumb, young people are broke for a reason. We're young.
Yeah.
You know, as a good rule of thumb, we're broke for a reason. It's people 45 to 85 that have got money because we've worked our asses off and saved it, invested it, whatever. So I said, you know, you must understand who your market is. And a 65-year-old lady cannot do what you're doing right now. So go back and retrain that horse. And that's what I heard just saying. You guys built a kick-ass plane. But there's not any other 23-year-olds with the kind of money you need to get you and your brother financially stable.
And
Is that right or wrong? I don't want to put words into your mouth.
No, that's it exactly. You know, we built an airplane that was really hard to build.
Yes.
It's really fun to build an airplane.
Yes.
Except the person who can afford now the most expensive kit on the market, person who can afford that and can afford the time is a very, very small niche.
Yes.
You know, if you got enough money for this, you probably don't have the time. If you got all the time in the world, you don't have the money to build the airplane.
That's right.
You know, so yeah, you know, I look back at it and we failed as a kit manufacturer.
Okay. So you built several of these planes. You built several of these kits. You tried to get this up and running, and how many years went by? And where did you build these planes, you and your brother?
Well, we started in the basement of our barn.
Okay.
In Baraboo, Wisconsin, or just south of there on the Baraboo Range. You know, it's when you talk about support from the parents. You know, when we're rebuilding the Champ, our first wrecked airplane, my dad up at the farm, we turned a shed into a place where he could park his car.
Yeah.
Well, guess what got pushed out when we brought in an airplane? The car's out, the airplane's in. He then builds a garage attached to the farmhouse, and you know, the first rule was no airplane parts in the garage. It's for his cars. No airplane parts. Then they're on vacation someplace, and it's like, it's going to take us 2 weeks to cover this airplane. We'll be done before they ever get back. They'll never know.
I love it.
It takes a lot longer than 2 weeks to cover the airplane. Of course, they come back. Garage
Shit's
is
everywhere.
full of airplane parts. Like, whatever happened to that rule? You know, like, well, we didn't think you'd know that we broke the rule. So at that point, then he goes, okay, see that barn? You guys can have the barn. We kicked the cows out. We poured a new floor in the basement of the barn. And it's like, I don't care what you do in there,
But that's where it stays.
but that's where it's at. So the barn became where we started. We started in a basement of a barn.
I love it.
And I thought we'd never need more space than this.
Yes.
This room is huge, and real quickly, so to build, and we're building a composite airplane, fiberglass airplane. You start from the outside and work your way in.
Okay, so it's the opposite of building a house. A house, technically, you start on the inside and build it out.
Well, no, you build the frame of the house.
Well, what I'm saying is the inside of the house, the concrete foundation, the walls, etc., and you work your way out to the landscaping and pool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You build, when I say out like that, you kind of build out like that.
Yeah. Well, we build, we take foam blocks, glue them together, carve them by hand into a shape that we like. Then you cover that shape with fiberglass. That becomes the plug. From that, you make a tool that you come off, and now you can take several parts out of the tool. From that tool, now you pull out the skins, the structure, you glue it together. So as soon as we started that,
how are you guys making a living when you're building these first few kit planes and trying to get this cool, badass plane off the ground? How are you making a living? How are you eating? How are you surviving? Where you sleeping? You're poor? What's going on here? Because when you're trying to build a business, you got to eat at the same time. So do you have part-time jobs, or you're in it, or you're living on mac and cheese? What are you doing?
Yep. When we started the company, we didn't have any other jobs. It was
100%.
100% in. We're working in a barn, living in the house right there.
With your parents?
We had it's a weekend place.
Okay,
we're there
right, okay.
full time. They come up on the weekends.
Yeah, fair enough.
They are working. So we had no rent.
Yep, fair enough.
It was a lot of mac and cheese and whatever Mom would bring to
bring your meals,
bring on the weekend, would last all week, that type of thing. My uncle, following that entrepreneurial side of the family, my uncle had a boat company up in Mora, Minnesota, and he built large fiberglass boats. And we used to go up there with empty 5-gallon buckets, and he would lend us the resin. Not that we were ever going to give it back, but we got the resin and fiberglass and everything from him, because he'd bring in resin on a tanker load for the boat company. And we're up there with 20-gallon, 4 or 5 buckets, and it's like, oh, take it and get out of here. Stop bothering me.
Yeah.
So the tools were almost for free.
Yes.
When we started building our prototype, we would go to junkyards, airplane junkyards, and the engine came out of a junkyard. Our control systems, we would scavenge, we'd go through wrecked airplanes, and we'd find parts that would work, and you're paying pennies on the dollar, and that's how we built that first prototype. Literally through the junkyards, through my uncle giving us the materials and living at home, and we worked every single day, even Christmas.
Yes.
I mean, there is no such thing as a day off.
No.
There's no such thing as an evening off.
No. A lot of people don't
every
get
day.
that about business owners. They think it's a 5-day-a-week deal.
No. It's every day,
Yes.
all day.
It is like your kid, isn't it, Dale? It's like a child.
Yeah.
I don't have children myself, and people often ask me why I don't have kids, and I kind of joke and make a joke, but it's kind of not really a joke. It's kind of serious to say, Down Under Horsemanship was my kid. My business was my kid. I worried about it. I thought about it 24/7.
Yeah.
I went to bed thinking about it. I woke up thinking about it. I got threatened by it. I was jealous of it. It was my kid. It's a 24-hour fucking job.
Yeah.
And it's like that was my child. Sometimes you're proud of it. Other days you want to strangle it. Other days it disappoints you. Other days you wish you got rid of it. That's what a business is in a lot of ways. It's, to me, is like a living, breathing child. You have to protect it, have to take care of it. So I love that.
There's nothing other than a child that has that type of emotional, passionate response. Will you do anything for your kid? You'll do anything for your business.
Yes.
And that's why I always come back to, you won't do anything for your business if you're in it just for the money.
Mm-hmm.
No, it has to be, it is your child. You are going to do anything, and like a child, it's 365 days. And, you know, it's...
If it's crying at 1 o'clock in the morning, you get up and feed it. And if that business is bitching to you at Sunday at midnight, you're out there taking care of it.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a damn good point that people need to understand. It's a commitment. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah,
And if
it's a
you're not
lifestyle.
willing to give it that lifestyle, you're going to fail. You know, I had at the last tour I did, I had a couple thousand people show up and listen to me, and I had about 6 kids come through my autograph line, and they all said, you know, I signed a piece of paper for them, a photo of me, and they all said, you know, give me some inspiration, give me something that will really help me. I want to start my own business. And I said, work harder. I wrote down there, good luck to you. Work harder than everybody else.
Yep.
You could see the fucking disappointment in their eyes, Dale. They thought I was going to say some inspirational bitch, you know, look at the sky and sail to the fucking sunset or some bullshit that's on somebody's inspirational wall in their office. I said, work harder than everybody else.
Yep.
Because that's the one thing that will beat talent. That's the one thing that'll beat genetics or smarts, is outworking everybody.
Yep.
But it's the one thing everybody's capable of doing. You said, how many years do you think your brother and you literally work 7 days a week? How many years do you think you two were that committed to that lifestyle?
Certainly all the way through the 80s.
So 10 years?
Yeah, well,
7?
longer than that. Probably, you know, when we were working on our first project to be a certified airplane, you know, and by this time we've moved up to Duluth, Minnesota, and Oshkosh, the EAA Air Show, is the event that the industry revolves around.
Yes.
We're going to introduce our brand new airplane at Oshkosh, and it's the beginning of July, and I remember one of the guys that's working for us and with us at that time, it was Tuesday evening, and he looked at his watch and he goes, well, I've got my 40 hours in this week, can I go home? Nope. Tuesday.
No.
Somebody who worked for us already had his 40 hours in.
Yeah.
That's the way
Yes.
it was, you know. So how long did it last? I think we were taking Thanksgiving and Christmas
Yes.
off before that, but
Yes.
it was still 7 days a week.
It is, isn't it? It's like
And-
owning a dairy farm. Those cows have got to get milked
Exactly.
7 days a week.
Yep.
There's no time off.
Yeah. And when you are, you know, there are deadlines, and usually the deadlines are financially motivated. When you're producing something, it's like, we got to get this done on this amount of money by this date, or there is no tomorrow.
We're losing our ass, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's either done or don't bother.
I think that's the biggest takeaway I want a young person that's listening to this right now to understand, is you better be committed. It's a 7-day-a-week project. It's you know, I always say this to young, you know, in the when people graduate my academy, during the ceremonial speech I give them, I tell them this. I say, here's the deal. You can go to fucking Harvard and spend $200,000 for what I'm about to tell you in 5 minutes. You ready? 8 hours a day is going to get a roof over your head and food on the table. That's it. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's all that's going to get you. Roof over your head, food on the table. It won't get you retired. Won't you get you any quality of lifestyle, etc. Okay? 10 hours a week, 5 days a week will get you a roof over your head, food on the table, a little bit of retirement savings, etc., but not a lot. But if you're willing to work 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, you can get food on the table, roof over your head, and some retirement. If you're willing to do 14, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week for several years, and bust your ass like that, you know, you can get wealthy. But you gotta be that committed to it. Unless you're from the Lucky Sperm Club and you're going to inherit a bunch of money, which 99% of entrepreneurials never get. You know, I think there's a stigma in the news, and as far as I'm concerned, from the liberals, that all rich people inherited their fucking money. No, most of them didn't. 99.9% of them had to friggin' bust their ass. They had to work their ass off to get it. You know what I mean? You know, they took a lot of chances. They took a lot of risks. Very few people come from a lucky sperm club and inherit their money. And the ones that typically do, typically piss it away. They don't have it past a generation.
Yeah. And this is the message that has to be repeated over and over again. Because one thing that I think we saw through the pandemic, and probably even just before that, life is not supposed to be this easy.
Yes.
You know, where you shouldn't be able to be working at a job and then on, 2 in the afternoon go, I don't really like it here. I'm going to go next door and get the night and have a job.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that easy. You can't just say, screw it, I don't like this, I'm going to go next door.
That's right.
Because all of a sudden, it's not hard for kids to get a job, and pay is good, and it ain't going to last.
No.
And there's going to be a rude awakening to a lot of people who think, getting a job's easy, and I feel like I'm just going to work from home now.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That's not the way the world works. Businesses aren't efficient when everybody's working at home.
Yes, because there's a lot less accountability. So changing subjects here just a little bit. So you and your brother, how many years did it take you to figure out this cool, fucking badass plane you guys invented that was cool as shit, was not going to be when I say sellable, was not going to get you where you wanted to be? 2 years, 3 years, hard-headed, you saw it quickly. How long did it take you to figure out this first race was not going to be the race that took you to the finish line?
Well, we didn't see it quickly.
Okay, that's okay. Say it. The one thing I want about this podcast is people to see where you fucked up. You're a successful man. You're very good at what you've done. You've changed an industry. You've changed the world. Tell me and them what you wish you could go back and do differently. So don't hide those things. Say, hey, Clinton, we were too pig-headed. We should have given up on year 1 and changed direction, but we went 10 years. That's why I'm asking these questions.
Yeah. Well, looking back, our first design was not a successful selling. We weren't successful selling it.
Okay. So you're making a profit?
No.
No. Okay.
We're
covering costs.
Hand to mouth.
Yep.
Barely.
Yes.
But, when we first introduced the airplane, we had the coolest airplane anybody had ever seen. We went to the Oshkosh Air Show with a stack of order forms. One of us is going to be signing orders, the other is going to be controlling the crowds. That's this is the coolest thing. Everybody's going to want one. We left that first air show with no deposit, no order. It was like, really smart people would have said, screw this, it doesn't work. But then a really smart person wouldn't have ever been successful at this, because the reason that we ended up being successful, our airplane was a marketing hit. We're on the cover of every magazine in the aviation industry.
Yep.
Everybody knows our name.
Yep.
Nobody wants to buy the airplane, but everybody knows Cirrus.
Yeah.
And so that first year we're using a very conventional engine. Now this is 87, 88 time frame. Aircraft industry is the only industry left in the world that still uses a leaded fuel. And we use that in order to keep the engine from knocking.
Yeah.
That's why you put lead in. Because the way an airplane is used from the altitudes, it's a very difficult thing to solve. So our second airplane was going to be, we're going to put in a V8, a Chevy V8. We're going to build it up like a NASCAR engine, able to produce 800 horsepower, but we're only going to run it at 300 horsepower. Therefore, we're not going to be working this engine that hard. Great idea, right? Mm-hmm. 15 hours into flight test, we had an engine fire. The airplane, we lost the airplane. Alan was in the airplane, he was flying. I was flying chase, so he takes off on one of the test flights, and I pull up next to him, and we're climbing out, and I looked over, and I was like, Alan, there's smoke coming out of the back of the airplane, which is not something you want to hear. And then it was like, there's flames coming. I see the back of the airplane's on fire. He lands it, puts it down into a field, climbs out, airplane catches fire. It's got 100 gallons of fuel on board. Burns up to the point where, we're shoveling it. Yeah, the engine was a molten. piece of aluminum there. When we were, that was in June. We're getting ready for the Oshkosh Air Show, which is the end of July. We're going there saying, with this airplane, this engine, this combination, we're going to take over the industry. We've sold a handful of kits, enough to feed ourselves.
Fund a little bit, yeah.
But now, this is going to take off. We're going to sell hundreds of them. And we end up burning up the airplane a month before the air show. And then you sit there like, okay, it's over.
Yes.
What do we do?
Yeah.
Well, we take our original prototype back to Oshkosh. We sell a few more kits.
One thing about, you said something that I want to comment on about the marketing. You said that you guys were marketing a huge success. Everybody knew who you boys were.
Everybody knew.
Everybody thought it was cool what you were doing. You're obviously innovators, and your marketing was on point, but your product wasn't. As far as a sellable, marketable deal. I'm not talking about quality, but I'm talking about something that went on.
Right.
That reminds me of this. One of my mentors, Dan Stewart, who runs the marketing firm that I use, one of the first lessons he taught me about marketing is he said, Clinton, great marketing just prolongs the demise of a bad product. Great marketing just prolongs the demise of a bad product. So if your product is not good, the marketing will carry it for a while, but it'll eventually fail. That's what popped into my head. It's not necessarily that your product was bad. It's just it just wasn't where you needed to go. You changed it clearly. You knew that you built this cook-ass plane that nobody wanted to buy. It was badass. Everybody was talking about it. You got everybody's attention.
We built a great airplane for a market that didn't exist.
I love it.
That's in reality what it was.
Yeah.
But that airplane marketed was, I'm not talking about we had a great marketing department. It's Alan and I selling it. But the airplane was so unique and turned so many heads that everybody in the industry knew it.
Yeah.
They had seen or heard of this airplane.
They knew you were here to play. They knew that you got everybody's attention, which should have opened some doors, did it not?
Opened tremendous amount of doors.
Yes. Should have got people's attention.
And it's the reason we became successful. So we have a product that was unsuccessful, that was unique enough to market the company and show that the company could be successful with a better product. So through this, we build our second airplane, burns up, we sell a handful of kits instead of hundreds. The third year, would have been, let's say, 1990. Actually, I'd be the fourth year we were there. But 1990, we were going to go to the air show. Had everything worked out, we'd have had our 3 prototypes. Because now we've built our 3rd prototype for the next one. And we were going to have 2 of our customers who had finished airplanes make it to the show. We're going to have a fleet of airplanes. It was like, now we're going to take off again. Well, that air show in 1990, we had our 3rd prototype, which was a far better airplane than the...
You figured out what went wrong with the one that burned up.
Yeah. It was a far better airplane, but we had a conventional engine. It was like, okay, I understand why aircraft engines are the way they are. Put an aircraft engine in. But the 2 customers that were going to come ended up not getting the airplane done in time and weren't able, so we're still there just with
a prototype.
With our 1 prototype. And it was really at that show when we're going, okay, if we're going to do something in this industry, if we're going to stay in the kit plane industry, we can build a far better airplane than a Cessna 182. But it's got to be easy to build. It's got to be simple to fly. It's got to be fall asleep simple to fly.
Idiot proof.
It's got to be idiot proof. We're going through what it is, and actually on the looks, everybody says the Cirrus, the SRs are the most beautiful airplane. When we were designing the SR, we were looking at it saying, well, we could build this as a kit, but that's not the industry we want to be in. So we're going to go take on Cessna. Yeah, a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
And we're going to go beat them because we just failed as a kit company. Therefore, we can go beat them.
See, I love that balls.
And
craziness, balls, whatever you want to call it, but
But when we're designing the airplane and what we want is a beautiful airplane, but we just had a very unique, polarizing, futuristic airplane. We don't want that again. We want an airplane that isn't polarizing, that people look at and say, okay, that's an airplane.
I can see myself being in that.
That's the way airplanes should look. But we wanted it to still be sexy enough that, you leave your Bonanza and you see our airplane, and now you go back to your Bonanza and go, well, yesterday I had the most beautiful airplane in the world. Now it looks old because I see new, modern. So we were looking for that emotional response.
Love it.
How do you design the airplane to get the emotional response that's not polarizing, but saying, that's a beautiful airplane. And then when we're designing it, so by this time, when we're designing the SR-20, our single engine airplane, both Alan and I are married and we have kids.
Oh, truly. You're out of the farm barn by now?
We're out of the farm.
A warehouse somewhere?
Yeah, we had built a couple of hangars,
So as you're going, you're slowly making a profit, which is feeding your capital, correct? You're making some sort of profit, which is giving you enough money to jump to the next level.
Yeah. No. We're cash flowing.
You're just cash flowing.
I mean, we're
borrowing
taking
money.
We're taking money in.
Okay.
So we're designing an airplane that's going to change the industry. And I'll get back to how we fund it in a second. But while we're working on the airplane, we're both married and we have kids. So our attitudes towards, I want to have a cool airplane, and I don't care how complex it is, I don't care how hard it is to fly. All of that's changed now when you got your family in the airplane.
Safety.
And the design requirements on the SR-20 was that my wife had to want to fly.
Love it.
And that's the key to our success. And that simple statement, nobody else in the industry said. My wife has to want to fly. It's not acceptable to say she's willing to fly. She'll put up with flying. It has to be she wants to go. And it's got to be, the non-pilot has to come away saying, if we can't get there in that airplane, it's just not worth going, because I'm no longer going to put up driving. And these things were, so at that time, designing airplanes, well, actually all through history, you design for the pilot, right?
Yes.
Who's buying the airplane? The pilot. Yeah, not really, but that's the way we design airplane. Why do you fly? To get from point A to point B faster than something else. So speed was everything. And how fast can you go on how little fuel, and you want a nice looking airplane for the pilot, but it really doesn't matter how complex it is. If the pilot can fly it, that's okay. I learned real quickly after I was married, that's not okay. Patty's parents live in central Wisconsin. We're up in Duluth, Minnesota. It's a 5-hour drive to go down to the grandparents. Or it's an hour and 20 minutes in an airplane. And she'd rather sit in the car for 5 hours than in an airplane for an hour 20. Then you sit back and go, well, I can make the airplane faster. What if we get there in an hour and 15 minutes instead of 5 hours? It's like, no, you're not getting it. The time doesn't matter.
It's a safety thing.
It's safety, it's comfort.
Safety and comfort.
Safety is going to be implied. You have to be safe, but we obviously did things different on that. But, cutting 5 minutes off, if you're miserable for an hour and 20 or you're miserable for an hour and 15, the answer is going to be no. So speed didn't matter. So we have to change everything about the impression, the emotional impression that you get in an airplane.
Okay.
And that's what we drove for. How do you sit in the airplane? How do you get in and out of the airplane? Where do your hands go? What do you touch? What does the person in the right side see, touch, feel? Airplanes typically have a big panel. They're up high because it's full of instruments and all of this stuff. Well, we are flying around in a Cessna 310, which is a twin engine, 6-seat, great airplane.
Yeah.
I mean, capable, 2 engines, it's safe, de-ice equipment, it's fast, it'll go, 190 knots. Everything about this is great. And looked at my wife, and she goes, well, I'd still rather drive. And I was like, why would you want to drive instead of this big, comfortable, great airplane? The answer that came back was, after we talk about it for a while, she goes, well, I'm not comfortable in the airplane because I don't think you know how to fly it properly. And I'm saying, like, what do you mean I don't know? I'm a great pilot. How could you say I don't know?
Nothing like a wife to tell her husband,
Yeah.
well, you're a piece of shit.
I'm a great pilot.
I love it.
Clinton's grabbing a cocktail and we'll be right back. Get yourself one and enjoy this short clip.
That's what I
Finance it
laugh
for ya.
about. You go to the Raynham fraternity, and if you're a young kid walking into the Raynham fraternity, you go out in the parking lot, and there's $500,000 trucks and trailers and rigs everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
You'd think, oh my God, there's millions in this business. Psst, what you don't know is 90% of them are up to their eyeballs in debt. They're all trying to keep up with the Joneses. They're all
Yep.
trying to keep up. That's one thing I loved about Bob Loomis. Bob Loomis is a famous guy in the Raynham world and bred phenomenal horses. And, he'd show up to a horse show with a pretty damn modest 25-year-old Sooner trailer,
Yeah.
but he'd unload $1.5 million worth of horses out of it.
Yeah.
Well, other guys will show up to the horse show with a $350,000 rig and unload a $40,000 donkey at the back of it. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, Loomis got it. He knew his value was in horse flesh and what he could sell and having the best horses. He didn't have to have the best truck, the best trailer. If you went to Loomis's old ranch that he had, it was very modest, almost a little bit run down even.
Yeah.
But I sure as shit know that when he was in his peak, you went there for the very best horses. So you might walk out of there with a $500,000 3-year-old. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to the horse industry. A lot is that you'd think there's a lot of money in it, but in reality, most people are up to their eyeballs in debt.
Every passenger will ask every pilot every time they take off. Now, again, I'm backing up 30 years.
Yep.
But the questions were, where are we? Because before we had moving maps and the screens,
GPS and all this shit. Yep.
before we had that,
You're back
you
old
were-
school with a map.
you got a map in your lap and you're triangulating between a radio beacon, nowhere's near where you're actually going, looking at round gauges. So the passenger has no idea where we are in reality. They can't look up and say, I know exactly where I am. So they are going to ask, where are we? And in an old airplane, they're small, they're noisy, they're hot in the summer, they're cold in the winter. The person's sitting there afraid anyways. They think, well, okay, this pilot's not that smart. It must be lost, at least with my wife. She's looking over at me going, he really doesn't know how to fly this. We must be lost. Where are we? Then she'd ask, well, how long do I have to put up? When are we going to get there? Because how long do I have to put up with
The uncomfortable.
this in an airplane? And then the third question, in a sense, and it's maybe not as much a question as the third aspect, a passenger will stare at the fuel gauge the entire time because they're sitting there going, we're lost. And if we're lost, we really don't know how long we're going to be here or where we're going. We're just going to accidentally stumble across an airport, hopefully. So they stare at the fuel gauge going, we're going to run out of gas. So when we started we designed that to answer those questions. And this is coming up with the conversation with my wife.
It was your wife that kind of got this ball rolling in your head. Those three questions, did they come from your wife or some of them from her or?
No, those were the questions she always asked. And it hit reality when she's going, I don't think you know how to fly the airplane.
Yeah.
And it came back to, we're in a twin engine airplane. And we were proud of the fact that we had all the instrumentation duplicated on the co-pilot side, everything. This plane was decked out. And she's in there going, well, when we're flying, she'd look at me, you're paying attention to your engine and your instruments. She goes, you never pay attention to my engine and my instruments. And then you go through, well, all that instruments really don't have to be there. They're just duplicates,
Show and tell.
So she'd sit in the plane afraid to touch anything, thinking if it's in an airplane, it's there for a reason. And I'm explaining, it doesn't really have to be there. It's just duplicate. And she's going, if it doesn't have to be there, why is it there? Well, I don't know why it's there. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So it was back to, how do you make her be comfortable? How do I make her be comfortable? She thinks I'm lost. She's wondering how long you have to put up with this uncomfortable, this environment, staring at the fuel gauge, afraid to move because she might touch something important. And I'm like, you're right. None of that makes sense. We have to make an airplane feel more like a car because that's the way we're used to traveling.
Yep.
We all understand traveling in a car.
Yep.
So then from that point on, we're going to shape the panel. We're going to focus everything at the pilot, specifically. There's still controls. You can still fly from the right, but you don't have everything front. You got to look over the left. Yeah. It's not a big deal. You shape it. You make it feel the way that a car feels. And then you put in computers to do what the passenger is thinking. Now it's in there, it sure makes life as a pilot easier. But everything, when we started designing the instrumentation and all of the flat panel designs started to come out and start working on these things, it's important to the pilot, but I already know how to fly. So it's not changing my ability to fly. It changes my ability to be able to fly. And I mean that because when we came out with the SR-20 with a computer screen in the middle, my wife then could sit there and look at the screen. There'd be a line on a screen with a destination and an airplane on the line. Could look at that and say, okay, we're not lost.
We're on the right track.
I see a clock that says when we will get there. So, okay, I got 1 hour left that I have to be in here. And more important than a good fuel gauge, because that's what, the industry pushes. My new gauge is more accurate. You know what? Nobody cares. Mm-hmm. Nobody cares how much fuel you have on board. All that matters is, do you have enough fuel on board?
Yes.
So there'd be a totalizer that says, when we hit this destination, we still have 25 gallons. Then she could look up at that and say, oh yeah, we got plenty of fuel. And we're not going to get lost. And I no longer have all the crap in front of me that I'm afraid to touch. And we're in nice, comfortable bucket seats. And we're sitting very high with a very low instrument panel so she can see forward. The other thing is, in airplanes, people get sick.
Yeah.
Well, 3 dimensions is what creates that tendency. But what really creates that tendency, or what stops that, is if you can see the horizon, you're less likely to get sick. Yeah. So in the other airplanes that we had flown in the past, the instrument panel's up here. High. Kids come along, my wife's in the back seat, you can't see forward, it have a high wing, you can't see out. Anything other than a perfect day, she's sick. Now she's back there sick, afraid we're lost, gonna run out of gas, in an airplane that you're sweating in the summer. So it's change. Our design was all around changing the emotional response that you get from the passenger. When I say it's always the pilot who buys the airplane, it's almost never the pilot who buys the airplane. We as pilots think that we get those choices, but we all answer to somebody else. Mm-hmm. There's an impression that we are making on somebody. For me, it's a 5'8" blonde that I'm married to. But it's a wife, it's parents, it's kids, it's partners, it's board of directors, it's clients.
Yes.
There's a reason that you've got this airplane. And we said we have to design an airplane that takes all of the people and turns them from, no, you don't need an airplane, to, yes, it's okay to have an airplane.
Yes.
And
preferably, let's have another one.
And let's have another one. Yeah. And by changing the requirements on the airplane from an airplane that has to go X fast or do other things, the requirement on the airplane was that the person sitting in the right seat has to want to be there.
Today's episode was filmed at and produced by Uncut Productions, marketing by Stewart & Associates, and organised and administrated by Down Under Horsemanship. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time, mate. Cheers.